Welcome back to my channel. This is a modern Nigerian horror story titled The Hands of a Healer. Dr. Olamide Adeyemi stood at the operating table, his gloved hands steady as he made the first incision. The bright surgical lights cast a sterile glow over the patient's unconscious body. The heart monitor beeped steadily, a rhythmic assurance of life, one that would soon be stolen. Outside, Lagos pulsed with its usual chaos. The hospital, St. Raphael's Medical Center, was one of the best in the city. Families placed their trust in its doctors, never questioning the outcomes. But behind the pristine walls, something sinister thrived. Dr. Olamide was more than a skilled surgeon. He was a businessman, and business was good. He worked efficiently, slicing through flesh with practiced ease. Beside him, his trusted assistant, Nurse BC, handed him the instruments without hesitation. She never spoke during these procedures. She had learned long ago that questions were dangerous. Tonight's patient was a 28-year-old man, admitted for what should have been a routine gallbladder removal. But Dr. Olamide had other plans. The man's kidneys were in perfect condition, prime for extraction. The client in Dubai had wired $50,000 up front. As he carefully removed the kidney, he felt nothing. No remorse. No guilt. Just the satisfaction of another successful transaction. When it was over, he stepped back and peeled off his gloves. The patient's vitals were crashing, but that was expected. He turned to BC. Time of death. She glanced at the clock. 2:43. 2:43 a.m. Dr. Olamide nodded, stripping off his surgical gown. He would leave the rest to the hospital's records department. Another unexpected complication. Another grieving family. Another payday. Dr. Olamide walked into his private office, locking the door behind him. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with the faint metallic smell of blood still lingering on his hands. Despite the thorough scrubbing, he sat at his desk, unlocking the drawer where he kept his burner phone, one used exclusively for his secret transactions. A single text awaited him. Package received. Payment processed. A satisfied smile played on his lips. He tapped on the banking app, watching as the dollar equivalent of 50,000 USD reflected in his offshore account. This was his 6th transaction this month. His network was vast and efficient. The organs harvested from unsuspecting patients never remained in Nigeria for long. Through corrupt intermediaries, they were transported across borders, reaching wealthy clients in need of transplants. The system was foolproof. Or so he thought. A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. He quickly locked the phone away before calling out, "Enter." Nurse BC stepped in, her expression neutral. "The family is asking to see you." Of course. The grieving family. The part he hated most, not because he felt guilty, but because it was tedious. He had perfected his script over the years. A deep sigh, a solemn shake of the head, a hand placed gently on the shoulder. "They trust me," he thought, adjusting his white coat. "They always do." Amaka S. sat in the hospital's waiting room, her fingers clenched tightly around her phone. Her younger brother Chaik had been admitted for a simple appendectomy. The doctor had assured her it was routine. Now, she was being told he was gone. Dr. Olamide approached with calculated sorrow in his eyes. "Miss S. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." Amaka stared at him, her mind struggling to process the words. Just 2 hours ago, Chaik had been stable, joking with her about what he would eat after surgery. Now, he was dead. She felt her breath hitched. What happened? Dr. Olamide sighed. There were complications. His heart stopped unexpectedly. "We tried to revive him, but..." He shook his head as if deeply pained. Amaka's heart pounded. Something wasn't right. She had heard of post-surgical deaths before, but this felt too sudden, too convenient. "Can I see his body?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Olamide hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. Of course. That hesitation made her stomach twist with unease. Inside the morgue, the air was cold and sterile. Amaka stood over her brother's lifeless body, struggling to hold back tears. His chest had been stitched up, but something felt off. She wasn't a doctor, but the surgical cut seemed larger than what she had expected for an appendectomy. She turned to the morgue attendant, an older man named Baba Tund. "Did they perform an autopsy?" she asked. Baba Tund looked around nervously before shaking his head. "No, madam." Amaka frowned. "Then why does his body look like this?" The old man hesitated. Then, in a hushed voice, he muttered, "Some things in this hospital, they are not as they seem." Her blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Baba Tund glanced at the security camera in the corner and shook his head. "Go home, madame. Let the dead rest." But Amaka couldn't, because she now knew something was very, very wrong. Amaka couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone horribly wrong with Chaik's death. The morgue attendant's cryptic words echoed in her mind. There was more to this than a simple medical complication. She needed answers. Over the next few days, Amaka launched her own investigation. She went through Chaik's medical records, but they were suspiciously vague. The attending physician's notes were incomplete, and key information about his surgery seemed to be missing. It was as though someone had intentionally covered up the details. Determined to uncover the truth, Amaka reached out to a close friend, A.O. Benson, a journalist known for exposing corruption. A.O. had helped her with small matters in the past, but this was different. This wasn't a trivial story, it was about her brother's life. "I know a guy who works in the hospital's records department," A.O. said over the phone one evening. "He can help you get a clearer picture of Chaik's case. But you need to be careful, Amaka. There's something shady about that place." Amaka nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'll take whatever help I can get. I need to know what happened to Chaik." With A.O.'s help, Amaka met with the hospital's records officer, a man named Yemi. He was a mild-mannered clerk who, after some coaxing, revealed startling information. "Look, I'm not supposed to be saying this," Yemi whispered, glancing nervously around the dimly lit back room of the hospital. "But there's a pattern. Dr. Olamide has been involved in strange surgeries. Patients come in for one thing, and then they're gone. Their families are told they died of complications, but the bodies are never properly examined. Their organs, kidneys, livers, hearts, are sold off to the highest bidder." Amaka felt a chill run through her body. "Are you saying he's killing them?" Yemi hesitated, then nodded. "He's been doing it for years. No one's ever been able to prove it because he's too smart. The hospital's higher-ups protect him. They don't ask questions. But you're not the first person to question it. I've seen too many files disappear. Too many deaths go unexplained." Amaka's heart raced as she absorbed the enormity of the truth. Dr. Olamide was not just a surgeon, he was a killer. And he was hiding behind a mask of professionalism. She left the hospital that day with a sense of urgency. She had to act fast, but she knew she couldn't do it alone. She turned to I.O. once again, urging him to investigate further. They had to gather concrete evidence before Dr. Olamide could silence them both. Amaka and A.O. devised a dangerous plan. They needed someone willing to put their life on the line. A volunteer who could go undercover and expose Dr. Olamide's criminal activities. After some convincing, Jack, the young man in his early 20s, who had been struggling with financial difficulties, agreed to take the risk. He had nothing left to lose, and felt the weight of injustice pressing on him. His family was barely getting by, and he saw this as a way to fight back against the corruption that ran rampant in their society. Amaka arranged for Jide to be admitted to the hospital under a false pretext. He would pretend to need a minor surgery, one that was common enough to avoid suspicion. Dr. Olamide would undoubtedly take the bait, thinking he was dealing with another unknowing victim. The plan was risky, but it was the only way to gather the evidence they needed. Ao and Amaka arranged for hidden cameras to be placed in the operating room, cleverly disguised to capture every moment of Dr. Olamide's actions. They would be recording him live as he performed the procedure. The trap was set. The day of the surgery arrived. Jide was wheeled into the operating room with a fake illness, one that would require a simple removal of the gallbladder. Amaka watched from a hidden room down the hall, her breath tight in her chest. In the operating room, Dr. Olamide stood poised as ever. He was flanked by his assistant, Nurse BC, who seemed unfazed by the impending procedure. Amaka's heart pounded in her ears as the camera feed began to stream on her phone. Jide was unconscious, but the surgery wasn't what it seemed. Instead of working on the gallbladder, Dr. Olamide immediately began making an incision in a different area around Jide's kidneys. The room seemed eerily silent, except for the soft hum of machines. Amaka couldn't believe her eyes. There it was, what she had feared. Dr. Olamide was harvesting Jide's organ. Jide's heart rate dropped dangerously as the procedure continued, and Amaka's blood turned to ice. She watched in horror as Dr. Olamide removed one kidney and handed it off to Nurse BC, who placed it into a cooler for transport. Amaka's phone shook in her hands. They had the evidence. But something went wrong. The sudden sound of Jide's faint cries echoed through the hidden speakers. He had woken up. His groggy, panicked movements made it clear that he was aware of the horrific reality unfolding. Dr. Olamide's calm demeanor cracked for the first time. His face twisted in irritation as he tried to push Jide back under anesthesia. "Get him back to sleep," he barked at Nurse BC. But Jide struggled, screaming. His body convulsed on the operating table, and the chaos that ensued sent the entire operating room into disarray. In that moment of confusion, Nurse BC was thrown off balance. The hidden camera continued to capture it all: Jide's bloodied body, the frantic efforts to sedate him, the ruthless determination of Dr. Olamide to finish the job. Then the door burst open. A nurse, who had been alerted by the noises, rushed in, followed by security personnel. The operation was halted, and Dr. Olamide's carefully constructed world of lies began to unravel. The footage was leaked to the media within hours, sparking an outrage that rippled through Nigeria. Amaka and Ayo's investigation was now a full-blown scandal. The hidden camera footage, combined with the testimonies from hospital insiders, confirmed what everyone had feared. Dr. Olamide was not just a skilled surgeon. He was a murderer and an organ trafficker. Police raided the hospital, arresting Dr. Olamide as he attempted to flee the country. His mansion, once a symbol of his success, was ransacked, uncovering more damning evidence. Dr. Olamide's trial was swift. His demeanor, cold and emotionless, remained unchanged. He showed no remorse for his actions, viewing the entire ordeal as a business transaction. He had been untouchable for so long that he truly believed nothing could harm him. But the tide had turned. The families of the victims, once silenced by grief and fear, now stood united. They gave testimony, their voices full of sorrow and anger. Dr. Olamide's crimes could no longer be denied. He was sentenced to life in prison. Months after Dr. Olamide's conviction, Amaka visited the site of the former St. Raphael's Medical Center. It had been shut down, its reputation irreparably damaged. Families had filed lawsuits, demanding compensation for the lives lost. But the scars ran deeper than that. Dr. Olamide's betrayal was a reminder that power, unchecked, could lead to monstrous acts. Amaka, now an advocate for medical transparency and patient rights, continued to push for reforms. The fight wasn't over, but as she stood in front of the hospital's closed doors, she felt a sense of justice settle in her chest. The harvest of death had been stopped. Did you enjoy this story? Please drop your comments below. Don't you forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Until next time, bye.